Academy Awards, New York Film Critics Circle, Grand Biennale Art Trophy, a star on the Walk of Fame. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has been honored with countless achievements. In 2008, the American Film Institute named it the greatest animated film of all time. So how did it go from this
Never seen anything like that before. A mirror on the wall.
I like when you know who's good and you know who's evil.
We just kissed her and she woke up and we said, yay!
to this?
The original story is problematic. Why is everyone ignoring that?
How is it problematic?
Backward. Story of seven dwarves living in a cave. What the f*** are you doing, man?
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Join me as I dive into Snow White's history to find out why Disney's beloved masterpiece devolved into one of the studio's biggest controversies. During the era of the Great Depression, theaters were filling up with those wanting to escape the harsh realities of day-to-day life to watch the newest animated shorts. Dizzy Dishes, The Mad Doctor, and The Skeleton Dance, just to name a few, gave audiences a quick laugh with simple gags or silly songs. These cartoons were never taken seriously the way Tom Sawyer or Cimarron were. After all, the two genres were so incredibly different, it would have been considered insanity to compare the two. One consisted of high budgets, dramatic scripts, and respected actors, when the other was only made to make you laugh for a few moments. With the two being on opposite ends of the cinematic spectrum, the idea of creating a full-length animated film was an impossible idea to the average film producer. With Disney releasing hits such as Old King Cole and Flowers and Trees, the first color animation, it was only a matter of time before he decided to move on to the next big thing. Throwing around the idea of creating such a film came with its own challenges. Animations were not easy to make due to the entirely hand-drawn process, which required a massive number of individual frames, leading to high production costs. To even consider the idea, Walt needed to be able to finance the production first. And thankfully, Three Little Piggies would soon be able to help. Premiering at the Radio City Music Hall on May 27, 1933, The Three Little Pigs received a sensational response and became the most successful animated short of its time, raking in an extraordinary $250,000 on a $22,000 budget. Through trial and error with the Silly Symphony shorts, animators figured out a way to truly convey personality within their characters, giving viewers a story they could relate with.
Well, no, I'd say human personalities in the body of a cartoon animal. It was just a way to sort of crowd our way into with the competition, you know?
On top of this, the song Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf by Frank Churchill became Disney's first radio hit for an animated short. With box office earnings and his newfound knowledge, Walt now understood that his dream of creating a full-length feature film was quickly becoming a reality. But there was still one question. What story was Walt going to tell? While reminiscing on his childhood, Walt Disney remembered a silent film he saw when he was just 15 years old about a young princess named Snow White. Captivated by the film's imagery, Walt found himself inspired, carrying the story with him, hoping he would one day have the chance to retell the beloved fairy tale. In 1934, Walt made the bold decision to bring Snow White to the big screen in his inaugural full-length animated feature. Not having been done before, nobody could be sure on how much it would ultimately cost to finance such a project. The team estimated the film could be produced for $250,000, and all of the earnings from the Three Little Pigs was used for production. After gathering his story writers to create a plot, Walt then brought his best animators to a soundstage, where he performed the entire film by himself, taking them through each scene in great detail. While everyone was calling him crazy for such an endeavor, Disney knew the film would be successful. After years of work, multiple loans, and Walt and his brother Roy mortgaging their own homes to complete the picture, the press began reporting that the incredible Walt Disney had lost it. Bank of America Vice President Joseph Rosenberg, who had been helping fund Snow White, began to seriously worry about the investment, asking himself what was really going on in the studio. He demanded to be shown what the bank had been financing, and on a Saturday afternoon, Walt brought Rosenberg into a dark theater where they watched the unfinished film together. For what must have felt like an eternity to a nervous Walt, the vice president didn't say a word. Once the credits rolled, Rosenberg stood up, walked outside, and sat in his car. Before driving off, he turned to Walt and said, "That thing is gonna make a hatful of money." One thing Walt Disney did best was push the boundaries of innovation. Walt simply did not find satisfaction in comfort, so when it came to Snow White, playing it safe was not an option. The film could not just be another silly symphony stretched out to 90 minutes. It needed to compete with live action. In the late 1920s, films were beginning to perfect tracking shots, as seen here in 1927's Wings. The only way something like this could be done in an animation would be through drawing each frame to show depth, and even then, the final result would still feel flat. Walt got an idea. What if a camera was flipped on its side and shot the picture vertically? He tasked his machine shop with building a mechanism capable of taking a camera and having it shoot downwards through several layers of animation cells. The final product was a 12-foot tall apparatus known as the multiplane camera. Taking at least 4 men to operate, this heavy and complex machine made it possible for the viewers to feel as though they were traveling deeper into the scene. It was first tested on the 1937 short The Old Mill, where it proved to provide a new richness to scenes, helping reassure Disney that his cartoons were one major step closer to competing with the world of live action. While the studio was busy improving the film's visuals, careful planning was also being done on how to synchronize the sounds which would bring Snow White to life. During the production of Steamboat Willie, artist Wilfred Jackson had developed a mathematical system of animating to a timed rhythm, as seen here. Marks were made using a bouncing ball on a work print of the film to provide a visual representation of the rhythm. Over time, this technique improved, going from this to this. Of course, while sound and animation were working together, the team decided to pull one more trick out of their hat.
I'm wishing for the one I love to find me.
To give the film a more realistic feel, sounds were manipulated and then layered over each other, creating a sense of space. Sounds such as the echoes of the dwarves' hammers in the mine, or even something as simple as leaves rustling or soft breathing, added an extra sense of realism that hadn't been used before. Walt Disney now understood songs didn't just need to accompany the animations. They needed to come from the characters organically, driving the story forward. In many ways, Snow White follows the format of a stage performance, conveying the character emotions and plot points through distinct songs, often matching the on-screen actions. This would allow the audience to feel fully immersed into the narrative the same way they would in a live theater production. On top of this, Walt knew that in order for the film to become a success, the audience would need to leave the theaters with songs stuck in their heads. Snow White needed a hit soundtrack, one unlike Disney had ever done before. With roughly 40,000 copies of its sheet music being sold, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf completely changed how Disney viewed music in their animations. Having composed music for Flowers and Trees, Santa's Workshop, and of course, The Three Little Pigs, Walt Disney looked to no other than Frank Churchill to bring the story of Snow White to life. Knowing that Disney wanted the quality of the music to match that of the animations, Churchill understood that he needed to come up with something truly special. To do this, he would need the help of talented lyricist Larry Morey. Together, the pair spent countless months coming up with a handful of songs, with each having an important role in the film. While the two continued to work on the soundtrack, Walt began on his quest to find the perfect voice for his Snow White. A young Deanna Durbin, having worked alongside Judy Garland in Every Sunday and starring in Three Smart Girls, seemed like a shoo-in for the part, possessing both the technical skills to perform semi-classical music and the vocals of a professional soprano. Durbin, quickly becoming well-known in Hollywood, confidently auditioned for the part. Although she sang beautifully, Walt rejected her. Disney was not just looking for a name. His search consisted of finding someone who would fully embody Snow White.
Then they're orphans. That's too bad.
Adriana Caselotti, having only worked a brief stint as a chorus girl for MGM, was not a household name in 1935 when she auditioned for the role. With the influence of her father, Guido Luigi Emanuele Caselotti, a music teacher and a vocal coach, and her mother, Maria Caselotti, a singer for the Royal Opera Theatre of Rome, Adriana's entire life revolved around music. While touring Italy with her mother and the opera company, the aspiring singer began training with her sister Louise, taking voice lessons and learning to sing opera. Upon her family's return to the United States in 1926, Adriana relearned English and began singing with her father, where they received the call.
My father was a singing teacher here in Los Angeles, and one day one of the Walt Disney representatives called his studio and asked if he knew of a little girl who could sing and speak like a child. And I was listening in on the extension phone upstairs, and I said, "Papa, how about me?"
The second Walt heard her voice,
Someday my prince will come.
He knew his search was over. Adriana Caselotti was now the voice of Disney's first princess. Now that the title role had been filled, and the songs were quickly being recorded, Churchill and Morey had begun to put their focus on the dwarves, who now needed a song to properly introduce themselves in the film. Becoming one of the most iconic Disney songs of all time, Hi-Ho, with its simple yet catchy tune, gives the audience an understanding of each of the dwarves' personalities. Needing a big band sound to create the echoes of the Seven Dwarfs singing, Churchill turned to Horace Heidt and his Brigadiers to record the song. To this day, just saying the words hi-ho triggers the music to begin playing in our heads, showing that Disney had made the right call. With all of the songs and animations now complete, it was time for Disney to introduce the world to Snow White. The film premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles on December 21st, 1937. Although the film was scheduled for 8:45 p.m., crowds began to arrive hours in advance to enjoy special displays of original Disney art as well as personal appearances by Mickey, Minnie, and Donald. Invitees included Clark Gable, Charlie Chaplin, and Shirley Temple, who throughout the evening could be spotted alongside the Seven Dwarfs. Walt, caught up in the festivities, was so excited that during an interview was unable to remember the dwarfs' names.
Well, our favorites are the little dwarfs. There's 7 of them. We've got names for them all that sort of fit their personality, such as Doc, who's the pompous leader, and then there's, I can't remember them all here tonight.
The audience, which consisted of hundreds of Disney artists, sat anxiously waiting to see what they had created after 4 exhausting years. Everything was riding on this moment. From the second the opening title flashed on the screen, a blanket of silence covered the theater, and for the next 83 minutes, Walt sat nervously, biting his nails while he waited for the verdict. Walt was not prepared for what would happen next. The audience, amazed at what they had just witnessed, erupted into a thunderous standing ovation which lasted several minutes. Walt Disney had done the impossible.
The lady who knows all about motion pictures, Luella Parsons.
There's one thing I do know, that this picture tonight is the best Christmas present the children of Hollywood can possibly have.
The visuals, the sounds, and the pioneer spirit which possessed the studio were all major factors in Snow White's success. However, you cannot win the hearts of the public without a great story. So what specifically was it about this film which made audiences feel it was relatable? Almost a decade earlier, a worldwide economic downturn, also known as the Great Depression, began with the stock market crash on Wall Street, leading to high unemployment rates, food shortages, poverty, and social unrest. Lasting until 1941, it is considered one of the worst economic disasters in modern history. Needing an escape from their daily struggles, people actively sought inexpensive entertainment through radio broadcasts, board games, and of course, movies. Although Snow White's plot can be considered a simple princess story, it is filled with symbolism, representing the many fears and dreams of most Americans in the 1930s. Snow White was seen as the embodiment of innocence, kindness, and positivity, or in simpler terms, good. With little control of her own life, she dreams of one day finding true love, and despite the many struggles she faces, remains hopeful throughout the film. The Queen, on the other hand, only caring about her own beauty, represents vanity, selfishness, and is deemed evil. To those who suffered the consequences of the individualist ideology of the 1920s, there was no mistaking that Snow White was created for them. During the whistle while you work scene, Snow White decides to clean up the dust and cobwebs which have covered every inch of the messy cottage. Although not a fun task, she chooses to remain positive, echoing the spirits of Americans who are currently trying to fix the mess left behind from the Great Depression. Another scene, which can be considered a crucial representation of the time, is when Snow White is attempting to escape the forest. Once Snow White is told the Queen has ordered the huntsman to kill her, Snow White then runs off into the forest where she imagines both trees and animals transforming into monsters and chasing her. After collapsing in fear, she finally takes a breath and sees the monsters for what they really were. It is here where she says,
I'm awfully sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you. But you don't know what I've been through. And all because I was afraid.
This was a nod to Roosevelt's 1933 inaugural speech where he outlined his plan for the Great Depression, stating the famous line,
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Of course, when it comes to the impact the film had on the public, one of the most important factors was her love story. In one of her first scenes, we are introduced to Snow White as she is singing to a group of doves, sharing that she wishes to be with her true love. This ultimately sets the tone of the film, showing the audience what she wants most. As she encounters different obstacles, she continues to hold on to her dream, thus giving the audience something to root for. Now, this may not have been everyone's dream during the 1930s. It still reflected the idea that one needed to keep moving forward, overcoming the adversities they would encounter along the way. Because of her ability to remain positive, Snow White was relatable to audiences everywhere, ultimately becoming a symbol of hope in the 1930s. Disney's first princess continued to touch hearts throughout the decades, earning the film countless achievements and awards. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs would go to win the title as the greatest American animated film of all time in 2008, over 70 years after its creation.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again.
Shouldn't be called dwarves.
No, they should be called people with dwarfism.
They shouldn't be called. What's wrong with being called dwarves?
Nothing, but that's not the correct
That's the
term.
story.
But it's criticising True Love's Kiss, the scene that you're seeing on your screen, because Prince Charming kissed the princess without consent.
It's no secret that in the recent years, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has gained quite a bit of controversy.
Because this is a movie that was made in 1937 and is being...
From small factors, such as the damsel in distress...
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
To integral parts of the plot, like the kiss.
Disney's concept designers added the kiss scene. They probably didn't expect it being called a problem.
Or even the 7 title characters.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? It's 4 dwarfs.
Snow White is no longer respected the way it once was. Following Snow White, animated films such as Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Sleeping Beauty filled seats time and time again. It seemed that the studio was only getting better with time. That is, until the 1970s. With the exception of a few hits, Disney films were becoming shapeless, lacking the magic that once made the studio stand out to begin with. Although some of these films are now considered cult classics, they can't seem to hold a candle to the classic days of Disney animation. Animators began relying too heavily on older methods that no longer fascinated audiences, leaving ticket sales at an all-time low and almost bankrupting the company. With the studio now understanding that they needed a new vision, animators were hard at work with a film that would place themselves back on top. On November 17, 1989, The Little Mermaid premiered, both saving the company and taking Disney into what is now known as the Renaissance. Films during this era included Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, and Mulan. On top of utilizing new technology in their animations, Disney reminded the world that they were capable of telling incredible stories with characters who deeply reminded us of ourselves. Female characters such as Belle, Pocahontas, and Esmeralda not only fit the mold of the Disney princess, they were also adding new qualities, becoming favorites amongst the modern audiences. They demonstrated a form of independence which was both realistic and respectful, balancing strength and vulnerability. After a strange period of budget cuts and straight-to-VHS sequels, Disney once again found themselves with another era of princess films, experimenting with new forms of animation and character development. This began with 2010's Tangled, a film which pushed the boundaries on computer animation while taking us through a beautiful love story built off of two incredible character arcs. 2 years later, we were introduced to Brave, a film that embraced the idea that a princess did not need to fall in love to find happiness. And Frozen, Disney's highest-grossing animated film at the time of its release. The two main characters, Anna and Elsa, both captivate audiences in their own ways. Anna being the more classic Disney princess, while Elsa represented the modern Disney princess. This would be the last Disney film to give their princess a love story, leading the way into a new era of storytelling. Villains in Disney films, for example, were once wicked forces pushing against the protagonist, destroying everything in their paths no matter the cost. This, of course, changed into the misunderstood character who was justified in their actions. Yes, this approach works in some films. However, this became predictable and ultimately quit working. But Disney continues to push the idea, despite their past success with true villains. Disney began catering to one group of ideas instead of listening to the formulas that had been successful for them time and time again. So the question is, why did they start doing this? It really all comes down to one thing: money. There are two ways we can categorize the ideology behind Disney Studios. Number one, Walt Disney's understanding that he needed to make money in order to tell stories. Number two, modern Disney's thought process of needing to tell stories in order to make money. Walt Disney was a dreamer who wanted nothing more than to create, and he knew that he couldn't continue to create without being able to finance his projects. That is why everything he touched had a soul. This mentality was long-lived through both his friends and colleagues. Over time, the Disney Company, evolving into one of the largest corporations in the world, looked at their films as a way to sell merchandise rather than stories they wanted to share. It is this backwards mentality that has molded their films to what they are today. With Disney now representing a new ideology, it is easy for the public to look at their past films and compare the differences, especially in the world of social media. More often than not, people take to Twitter to criticize Disney. This reached a point where Disney was only listening to the critics and doing what the critics would demand, with the final product turning into a mishmash of what they thought people would pay to see, lacking any real story or characters. That is why Star Wars went from this
luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you.
To this.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
And when your films are like this, you can't act like this is okay. Now fueled by conflict creators and feminism, Disney does not support their classic films the way they once did. Characters quit falling in love, villains quit being evil, men stopped rescuing women, and changes are made throughout the parks and films out of fear that someone will take to social media to criticize them again. So now, you have a person going on late night TV telling an actual little person that it's offensive to cast them in the film, when they're flat out saying, we want to be in the movie. And whose side is Disney taking?
It's not being progressive. You're hurting the community by what you're doing.
The term fairest of them all is now changed to who is the most just, so that little girls aren't taught about beauty at a young age. One of the original lessons from the 1937 Snow White was that beauty is only skin deep. The queen, wanting to be considered the most beautiful in all the land, is told that Snow White is the fairest, fueling her jealousy and wickedness. But what she is blind to is, unlike her, Snow White has a beautiful heart, which is what makes her the fairest of them all. This was an incredible lesson to young girls, and by removing that, Disney is in a way acting as the evil queen, only looking at the surface of the original film and not the inner beauty of its message. Movies are a powerful form of art, and it seems Disney has forgotten this. Initially, Disney captured the magic beautifully. Take Cinderella, for example. Over 75 years later, it remains a timeless masterpiece. With recent advancements in filmmaking, Disney sought to enhance the original, adding depth organically. Director Kenneth Branagh executed this vision brilliantly, honoring the source material while crafting a rich, believable world. In contrast, consider the 2022 remake of Pinocchio. The original story depicted Pinocchio's journey to becoming a real boy, emphasizing his poor choices and the valuable lessons he learned along the way. The remake portrays him as a character who makes only good choices out of Disney's fear that their main character would be labeled as a troublemaker, which fundamentally alters the narrative. It feels as though these remakes have become a vehicle for Disney to reshape classic tales to fit their new agendas. Now, with Snow White, the focus has shifted to themes of justice, dwarf actors were refused roles, and the love story is diminished as Snow White is portrayed as a warrior. This raises the question, who is this film truly for? It seems that in the pursuit of modernization, the heart of these beloved stories is lost.
If you had it to do over again, would you do any part of it differently?
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think I would.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is not merely a movie. It is a groundbreaking piece of art that redefined the landscape of animation and storytelling. As the first full-length animated feature, it showcased the potential of animation as a serious art form, blending creativity with technical innovation. The meticulous craftsmanship behind its animation, the enchanting score that has withstood the test of time, and its cultural richness have all contributed to its enduring legacy. As Disney shifts its focus towards remaking classic stories through contemporary lenses, it is essential to recognize the risk of overshadowing the original film. The charm and innocence of Snow White resonate deeply with audiences, offering timeless themes of hope, resilience, and love that continues to inspire. By attempting to erase or alter its narrative to fit modern agendas, we risk losing the essence of what made it extraordinary in the first place. To honor the spirit of Snow White, we must give it the respect it deserves. This means not only celebrating its artistic achievements, but also acknowledging the cultural significance it holds in the context of its time. Rather than viewing the original as outdated, we should appreciate it as a product of its era that still offers valuable lessons to this day. Let us cherish Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a timeless classic that deserves recognition and respect, ensuring that its legacy continues to inspire in a rapidly changing world. By upholding the original film, we can maintain a connection to our cinematic roots, celebrating the artistry and imagination that made Disney a household name.
Cool house, yes?